I still remember the way the canyon swallowed us whole. In May of 2007, it was supposed to be the trip of our lives. 4 of us left Portland that spring May. My best friend Liam, his girlfriend Chloe, and our friend Ben. We had been hiking together for years. We weren't reckless kids looking for cheap thrills. We knew how to read maps, pitch camp, and move through wild country without leaving a trace. This wasn't just another trip. It was the one we had dreamed about since high school, the Grand Canyon, but not the easy postcard version. We wanted silence, isolation, the raw beauty that doesn't share its space with crowds. Liam, always the planner, had found a hidden spot on satellite maps near the Havasu Falls area. He was certain it would give us what we craved: water nearby, a clearing to camp, but far enough from the main sites that we'd feel like the only people left in the world. By the time we descended into the canyon and followed the turquoise waters of the Abazu Creek, I felt like we had slipped into another world. Red cliffs stretched up into the blinding blue. Cottonwoods trembled in the warm breeze, and every bend of the trail revealed something bigger than photographs could ever hold. The first 2 days were perfect. We sweated under the sun by day, bathed in the cool creek in the evenings, and built a fire under a sky so endless it made you feel small in the best possible way. That second night, as flames painted our faces and laughter echoed against stone, I remember thinking, this is it. This is the happiest I've ever been. The canyon had become our cathedral, and the night sky our ceiling. It was just before midnight when it changed. We were packing ourselves into the tents when a sound ripped across the waterlong. Metallic, almost like claws dragged across stone. It came from the far side of the creek, sharp, scraping, too deliberate to be wind, too heavy to be deer hooves. We froze. Chloe's hand clutched Liam's sleeve. Probably a coyote, Liam whispered, but the usual certainty in his voice wasn't there. He swung the beam of his flashlight across the creek. Nothing. The sound stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was swollen, stretched too tight. We tried to laugh it off, tried to act like seasoned hikers who'd heard it all before. Eventually, we zipped the tents and lay in the dark. Sleep wouldn't come. My body kept waiting for something to happen, like my nerves had grown ears of their own. Then I heard it again, not scraping this time, but a low moan stretched thin, as if someone were trying to speak through a throat filled with mud. It rose and broke, carrying across the clearing like a human voice trapped inside a nightmare. Ben's whisper cut through the dark. "Did you hear that?" The moan came again, closer now, trembling like it was alive. Liam's zipper rasped open. I saw the beam of his flashlight slice through the black as he stepped out. "Stay here," he ordered. His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain pulling at its edges. We pushed our faces against the mesh of our tent, watching. Liam crossed the creek, the light shaking faintly in his hand. "Hello?" His voice echoed against the canyon walls. "Is someone out there?" Silence answered. He took another step, then another. His shoulders stiffened. "I see somebody," he called. "They're behind the trees. They need help." And then came the sound, the one I still hear in dreams. It wasn't a scream or an animal's cry. It was a shattering howl, a pitch that clawed at the bones inside your ears, filled with a hunger that felt older than the canyon itself. Something moved. It didn't walk into the clearing, it launched. A shape too long, too tall, pale as if carved from the moon itself. Its arms dangled nearly to the ground, fingers tipped with claws that glinted like obsidian. Its head was wrong sunken nose, 2 holes where breath wheezed out, and eyes that burned yellow under Liam's light. A wall of fur with eyes, but the body behind it was nothing like any animal we'd ever seen. It landed in front of Liam's tent. The canvas shredded like wet paper. Chloe's scream tore the night, but ended too fast, cut short by a sound I can't forget, the crack of bones splintering, the wet rip of flesh being torn. The monster moved with the efficiency of something that had done this before, reducing their lives into silence in seconds. Ben and I couldn't move. We sat pinned inside our tent, watching through slivers of torn nylon as the thing lifted its head. Its eyes met ours. Something thick and black dripped from its jaw blood, or something worse. That was the moment instinct overpowered fear. "Run," I hissed. My knife tore through the back of the tent. Nylon ripped wide. The instant we crawled out, the front of the tent collapsed under the slash of claws. I hit the rock's shoulder first, pain screaming through my bones. Ben scrambled behind me. For a second, under the wavering light of our dying fire, the thing looked unreal, like a figure sketched by a madman. Its body was all edges and angles, every movement jerking, unnatural, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. It gave a choking laugh that rattled like someone drowning. Ben grabbed a burning branch and hurled it with everything he had. Sparks flew as it bounced off the creature's chest. It didn't flinch. It just turned its head toward him, tilting like a curious predator. We grabbed stones, more branches, anything we could lift. We screamed, hoping noise would drive it back, but noise meant nothing to it. Hunger was the only language it understood. It stepped toward Ben. I saw him lift a rock the size of his fist, slam it against the thing's arm. A crack rang out, but the arm didn't stop. Its claws sank into his shoulder, dragging him forward. Ben screamed, and the thing bent its face to his neck. I wish I could forget what I saw. The mouth opened too wide, unhinging like a snake. Teeth like shards sank into Ben's throat. The sound was not just pain, it was the sound of something being erased. Bones snapped. Blood sprayed across the firelight. And then Ben was gone. A heap of flesh dropped like garbage. I was next. The creature turned its face to me. Every line of its body tightened like a bowstring aimed at my chest. My body didn't wait. My legs took over. I don't remember choosing a direction. I only remember running. I ran into the canyon with nothing but raw panic to guide me. Behind me came the howl again, piercing enough to split stone. Every bush scraped my skin. Every rock tried to trip me. The canyon that had been paradise that morning was now a maze built to kill me. I didn't stop. I couldn't. At times I felt the brush of cold air against my neck, as if claws were reaching for me. I knew if I turned around, if I saw its eyes again, I'd collapse. My lungs burned, my legs bled, but I kept running until my body was nothing but movement. At some point the sounds stopped. No howl, no pursuit, just silence. A silence so thick it weighed on my chest. I staggered into a shallow cave and curled myself into the farthest corner. All night I sat there, watching the dark breathe around me, replaying the slaughter in my mind. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Fear had hollowed me out completely. When dawn finally came, I dragged myself out of that hole. Every step felt like walking on splintered glass, but I followed the creek downstream, praying it would lead to safety. Hours blurred into one another. I was barely aware of the cuts, the bruises, the weight of dried blood clinging to me. Around 9 that morning, 2 tourists found me. They froze when they saw me stumble out of the brush, mud-caked, shirt torn, eyes wild. I tried to speak, but only guttural sounds broke from my throat. They called for rangers. That was the beginning of a new nightmare: questions, disbelief, the endless replaying of what had happened. By the time they reached our camp, it was ruin, the tents ripped open like wounds, the ground littered with pieces that no longer resembled my friends. The official story would say animal attack. The file would close. But I know better, because I was there, and I saw it. The rangers sat me down in a dim office, the smell of old coffee and paper stale in the air. My hands still shook, though I'd been scrubbed clean, though they'd bandaged my cuts. They wanted details, every detail, and I gave them everything: Liam's voice when he swore he saw someone, Chloe's last scream, the pale skin stretched thin as parchment, the way its eyes glowed in the dark like embers buried in ash. The ranger across from me, a man with silver hair and deep lines in his face, scribbled in his notepad. Next to him, a younger man in a suit FBI, I assumed, watched me with flat eyes, nodding now and then as if my words were stones skipping across water. When I finished, they both exchanged a look. Not surprise, not horror, just quiet calculation. The ranger leaned forward, his voice low. "Son, I understand you've been through hell. You've witnessed something no one should have to see. But I want you to listen carefully. Your mind may be filling in gaps it can't process. The truth is, a predator came into your camp. Likely a mountain lion, rabid, oversized, desperate. That explains the aggression, the claws, the attack." I stared at him, stunned. No mountain lion stands taller than a man. No lion tears through a tent like it's tissue. No lion walks on 2 legs and looks into your soul like it's memorizing you. The younger agent's pen scratched softly against paper. He didn't meet my eyes. The ranger sighed. Trauma can reshape memory. It protects you from the unbearable. But I knew what I saw. My mind hadn't invented it, it had survived it. I pressed my palms to the table and whispered, "If you think I'm crazy, then explain Chloe's scream. Explain Ben's neck torn in one bite. Explain the tracks they must have found in the dirt." They didn't answer. Instead, they wrote. In the days that followed, they kept me under fluorescent lights and soft voices, fed me pills that dulled everything sharp. I signed forms I barely read. The official story hardened like cement. 3 hikers dead cause of death animal attack. Case closed. But when they finally sent me back to Portland, I carried something they couldn't lock inside their files. A mark, an image etched behind my eyes, replaying every time I closed them. I tried to move on, tried to meet the families of my friends, to tell them the truth. The parents listened with tears in their eyes, nodding gently, as if I were a child babbling through a nightmare. "We know you did all you could," they told me. They didn't believe me. No one did. Back in my apartment, The city's noise pressed down on me in ways it never had before. Car horns sounded like screams cut short. The thud of footsteps in the hallway made my chest tighten. Nights were worst because nights brought silence. And silence meant I could hear it again. That moan, that laugh like choking, that howl splitting the canyon. The therapists said it was trauma, that my brain had created a monster to shield me from the brutality of an animal attack. They prescribed more pills. They told me to write my feelings down. But feelings weren't the problem. It was memory. Memory that gnawed at me like teeth I couldn't see. So I started searching. I typed everything I could remember into the void of the internet. Pale creature, Grand Canyon. Tall, thin, humanoid, glowing eyes. Monster mimics human voice. I found conspiracy forums, blurry photos, desperate stories of chupacabras and aliens. Nothing matched what I'd seen. I told myself maybe that was good, that maybe it meant it wasn't real, that maybe my therapists were right. And then one night, sometime around 3 a.m, I found a word, Wendigo. The Algonquin tribes called it a devourer of men, born from hunger and violence. A thing that had once been human, but had eaten its way into something else. Descriptions varied, but the core stayed the same. Tall, emaciated, gray-skinned, eyes glowing with cold fire. It imitated voices. It hunted relentlessly. It killed with a hunger that never ended. Every hair on my body stood on end. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. I fell into the folklore like a man drowning pulling at roots. I read missionary reports from the 17th century, anthropological studies, native accounts. Each time the words struck harder. Endless hunger, human voices from the trees, skeletal bodies with claws like knives. It was what we heard that night. What I saw. But the Wendigo belonged to the north, to frozen forests and endless winters, not the sun-baked walls of the canyon. What was it doing there? I couldn't stay home any longer. Portland felt like a cage. So I sold what I could, left the rest, and returned to the Southwest. I didn't go to hike or sightsee. I went hunting not for vengeance, but for validation. I needed to know I wasn't insane. For months, I drifted between small towns and reservations. I brought gifts where I could, asked careful questions. Most people turned me away with wary eyes. A white man prying into stories of evil spirits was an insult at best, danger at worst. My words were treated like smoke, intangible, unwanted. But in a faded roadside bar at the edge of Navajo land, an old man overheard me. His face was folded with age, but his voice cut clear when he leaned across the counter. If you want answers, find the one they call the listener. He lives where the wind has no company. The listener. It took me another week of dirt roads and half-forgotten directions to find him. He lived alone in a rusted trailer, perched on the slope of a barren hill. The air was thin there, carrying the smell of dust and creosote. He looked as old as the land itself, skin like bark, eyes deep as wells. I offered him tobacco and food, as I had been taught, and then I told him everything. The hike, the sounds, the creature, the blood. I left nothing out, not even the shame of running. He didn't laugh. He didn't shake his head. He only stared into the small fire between us, as if listening to something far away. At last he spoke, his voice like dry leaves. The whites call it Wendigo. That word belongs to another place, another people, but hunger wears many faces. We call it Sandy, the one who walks like a skeleton. I held my breath as he told me stories. One of prospectors trapped in a canyon during a brutal winter who turned to cannibalism when food ran out. Only one survived. When rescuers found him, he was no longer human. He had fled into the mountains, leaving stories of disappearances that stretched for generations. Another tale, older still, of a warrior who killed his own brother in sacred land for greed. The earth cursed him, draining him of fullness, leaving only gnawing hunger. His body stretched, his bones protruded, his eyes burned. He hunted his own people until they destroyed his name, but his hunger still lingered, tethered to the soil where it was born. The listener turned his gaze on me, and I swear it felt like he saw the mark on my soul. What you saw lives in that canyon. It sleeps sometimes, for years, decades. Then something wakes it, blood, violence, fear. You and your friends stirred it awake. I asked him why it hadn't killed me. His silence stretched long, and then he said, "It does not hunt for sport. It hunts for need. You ran, but running does not erase you. Now it knows your face, your fear. That is a thread it can follow. Never go back to those canyons, for hunger remembers." The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark. His words sank into me heavier than any official report, heavier than the disbelief of doctors or rangers, because they weren't just belief, they were warning. I left his camp hollowed out. For months after, his words followed me like an echo. It didn't matter where I went, Portland, Phoenix, some nameless motel off a desert road, I carried the same truth. The thing in the canyon wasn't just real. It had tasted my fear, and I had no idea how far its hunger could reach. I thought leaving the canyon behind me would mean leaving it all, but it never let me go. Back in Portland, life became a fragile imitation of itself. I walked through grocery aisles where the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and tried to act like nothing had followed me back. People smiled, cars honked, music spilled from cafe doors, but none of it felt real. Every face seemed hollow, every sound thin, like I was looking at the world through glass that only I knew was cracked. At night, the city fell quiet, and that was when the weight came. Silence didn't soothe me anymore. It pressed in, smothering, filled with memory. I'd jolt awake, certain that I'd heard claws dragging against brick outside my window. I'd dream of Chloe's scream, Liam's flashlight beam snapping through the trees, Ben's body collapsing under teeth that had no right to exist. The moment I opened my eyes, I expected to see those yellow orbs staring back at me from the dark corner of my room. The listener's words repeated like a curse. Now it knows your face. Hunger remembers. At first, I told myself it was paranoia, trauma sinking its claws into me. But then the small things began. One night, I came home from work and found muddy prints on my porch. Not shoe prints, too long, too narrow, with clawed tips at the end. I convinced myself it was some neighbor's dog, but the shape stuck in my mind. The way it looked stretched, wrong, as though the earth had been pressed by something that shouldn't walk this world. Another night, as I was falling asleep, I heard it again, that low moan, strained and broken, like a voice begging for help through a throat full of glass. It drifted through my window from the alley below. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it still seeped into me. When I finally forced myself to look, the alley was empty. The worst moment came 2 weeks later. I woke to the sound of my front door handle rattling. Not once or twice, but in a steady rhythm, as if something outside was testing it. My breath froze in my chest. I couldn't move. I stared at the door from my bed, every nerve screaming that if it opened, the yellow eyes would be there waiting. It stopped after a few minutes, but the silence that followed was heavier than the rattling had been. I told myself I was losing my mind, that the therapists were right, but deep down I knew the canyon hadn't kept it. It had followed me. I became obsessed. I read everything I could find, not just about Wendigos, but about other stories, other legends. Skinwalkers, shadow people, pale predators that haunted different corners of the world. Every account made me shiver with familiarity, yet none gave me answers. The more I searched, the deeper the hole grew, until I couldn't tell if I was studying folklore or writing my own obituary. I stopped working, stopped seeing friends. My life shrank into a cycle of research and paranoia. Curtains drawn, lights on through the night, a knife by the bed. Each day I convinced myself that tonight would be the night I wouldn't wake up. But the strangest part wasn't fear, it was the hunger. Not mine, but something that felt close, hovering, watching. There were nights I felt it pacing outside, just beyond the walls. I'd catch the faint scrape of claws against pavement, the brittle laugh echoing low and guttural, and the ground beneath me would seem to pulse like it missed a heartbeat. One morning, after another sleepless night, I walked down the block for coffee. The sky was just turning gray with dawn. That's when I saw it, or thought I did. Across the street, at the edge of an alley, a shape too tall for any man stood still. Thin, hunched, with arms dangling too low. It didn't move, didn't even sway in the breeze. My heart slammed against my ribs. A car passed, blocking my view for a second, and when it was gone, the alley was empty. I dropped the coffee. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was when I stopped doubting. I understood then what the listener meant. It hadn't killed me in the canyon, but that didn't mean I'd escaped. I was still prey, marked by the night my friends died. And prey is never free not while the predator remembers. I tried to leave Portland, packed a bag, bought a bus ticket east. But on the ride out of town, just as the city lights thinned into forest shadows, I felt it. Not saw, not heard felt. A pressure at the back of my skull, the same weight as that night in the canyon. I turned to the window, and for a heartbeat, reflected in the glass, I swore I saw its face behind mine, sunken gray teeth glinting. I stumbled off the bus 2 towns over, unable to keep going. Running didn't work. The thing wasn't chasing me by distance. It was tethered to me in ways I couldn't outrun. That's when I began to wonder. Maybe survival had been the cruelest fate. Liam, Chloe, Ben, they were gone, but they were free. I was left carrying the thing with me, dragging it into every city street and sleepless night. Maybe that was its real hunger. Not just flesh, but fear stretched thin, kept alive like an echo that never fades. And yet a part of me refused to give in. I thought of Liam's determination, Chloe's laughter, Ben's strength. They hadn't died for me to simply collapse. I told myself if I was marked, then maybe there was a way to understand it, maybe even stop it. That was when the dreams began. Not ordinary nightmares, but vivid visions that left me drenched in sweat, trembling like I'd been awake through them. In the dreams, I was back in the canyon. The walls glowed red under moonlight, and the creek pulsed with something darker than water. The creature stood across from me, its arms twitching like wires pulled too tight. It didn't move closer, didn't attack. It only watched. And when it finally opened its mouth, no sound came, only the faint metallic hum of silence itself. I'd wake gasping, certain that the dream wasn't a dream at all, but some kind of meeting place, a tether between it and me. A reminder. I started recording them, writing every detail. The way the moon bent wrong, the way shadows flickered against the canyon walls, as if something massive was moving just beyond sight. Each time I dreamed, I felt the same, weaker, thinner, like something was being drained from me. And then, one night, the dream shifted. It wasn't the canyon anymore. It was my own street, my own house. And the thing was no longer across the creek. It was standing in my doorway. I woke to find the window open, the curtains stirring in the night air. I don't remember moving them. That was when I understood the canyon wasn't where it lived. It was where it had awakened, where it had found me. But now it had crossed over into the cracks of my life, into every shadow and silence I couldn't explain away. I stopped sleeping altogether. But exhaustion is its own predator. It waits, it circles, and sooner or later it takes you down. I don't know what's worse anymore, the thought of seeing it again, or the thought of not seeing it and knowing it's still there, watching, waiting for the moment. Hunger outweighs patience. The listener told me never to return to those lands, that if I did, it would be waiting. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe once it's marked you, there is no safe land. Maybe it's already inside.